Tonight, the tragedy in Texas, historic flash flooding turning deadly. Disasters declared in nearly 24 counties. Drivers in Dallas trapped and homes destroyed after nearly a year's worth of rain fell in just 24 hours. And at the country's southern border, the horrific drownings. At least 2 migrant children dying after they were swept up in the raging Rio Grande. The emergency felt nationwide, with thousands of flights also delayed or canceled, and millions of Americans now in the storm's path. Also, charges dropped against 2 Atlanta police officers caught on camera fatally shooting Rashard Brooks at a Wendy's after he wrestled with one of the officers, tried escaping, and fired at officers with one of their tasers. The killing just weeks after George Floyd's sparked massive protests, why a special prosecutor is now saying the use of force was, quote, reasonable. Primary battles, Democrats in Florida voting for the candidate who will challenge Republican Governor Ron DeSantis. And in New York, 2 longtime Democrats and House chairs battling it out for 1 seat. Chuck Todd is here. And the dangerous policies, shocking and violent attacks caught on camera from coast to coast. Many of the suspects released almost immediately. The outrage tonight over lax bail reform laws, including from the governor of New York, who demanded the suspect in one case be rearrested. Plus, celebrity drought. Several A-listers from Kim Kardashian to Sylvester Stallone accused of wasting water and excessive use amid that historic drought out west. The warnings now handed down to some of Hollywood's biggest names. And 4-day school week, the district now making the change due to an ongoing teacher shortage. So will others follow suit as students head back to class? Top story starts right now. And good evening. The pictures coming in tonight are wild. The country hit with yet another once-in-a-lifetime weather event. The historic flooding in Texas turning deadly. Texas's governor declaring a disaster in at least 23 counties, and this is why. Parts of the state received nearly a year's worth of rain in just a single day. Rescues playing out throughout the day. The governor also saying at least 100 homes have been damaged or completely destroyed. But as the water there recedes, the impact felt in the skies. Videos showing packed airports from coast to coast, with FlightAware reporting more than 3,000 flights in and out of the U.S. delayed or canceled just today. The storm's also taking a tragic turn at the U.S. border with Mexico. A 5-year-old from Guatemala, one of several migrants killed by the currents in the dangerous Rio Grande. We'll have more on those stories in just a few moments. But we begin tonight with Blaine Alexander in Dallas, leading us off.
With more rain in 2 days than the city typically sees in months, tonight Dallas is facing its 2nd worst flooding in nearly a century.
The building is literally cracking right now.
The rain turning roads into rivers, leaving dozens of cars stranded. One young girl had to be carried to safety when her family's RV flooded.
This was the first time in 90 years that we've had this much rain in a 24-hour period.
Vanessa Villas says they had almost no warning. The water rose so quickly.
It was under here, but you couldn't see the trampoline.
So the water was past this trampoline?
Yes, it was past the trampoline, yeah.
How long did it take for the water to rise?
Minutes. It was minutes. It took very little time.
The unforgiving waters have already claimed at least 1 life. In Mesquite, Texas, officials say a woman's car was swept off the road. Inside, she was on the phone with her family before losing contact. Tonight, Texas Governor Greg Abbott has declared a state of emergency.
We have more than 100 homes being damaged or impacted in some way.
Nearly 3 million people remain under flood watch, including parts of Texas, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Louisiana, where many are already struggling to clean up from round 1. Even parts of Arizona left waterlogged. While further west, millions more are weathering the sweltering sun. 5 million people are under heat alert, with some temperatures across California expected to top 100 degrees. Back in Dallas, while the rain is over, for Villas and her family, the cleanup has just begun. This trailer holds all that's left of her son's bedroom.
Water was coming in from everywhere. The doors, the bottom of the ground, the walls, it was just everywhere.
All right, Blaine Alexander joins us now from Dallas. Blaine, you know, storms always expose vulnerabilities in cities when they hit. Flash flooding is sometimes so hard to prepare for, but it seems like in some cases Dallas was really unprepared for this level of flooding. We saw those incredible images in your story. What are Dallas residents saying?
You know, Tom, we just heard from Vanessa there in that story, and she told me that she and her family, her 3 young children, as well as many people who lived on that street, were largely unprepared. They woke up in the middle of the night. The water was already up to their ankles. She said they had to rush to get their kids out, and then they went next door and helped their neighbors. She said, bottom line, they didn't expect it to be that bad. She's lived in that house, Tom, for nearly a decade and has never seen flooding like that. Tom.
Those storms in the southwest also turning deadly at the Texas-Mexico border. The floods giving strength to an already dangerous Rio Grande. The currents this week claiming the lives of several migrants, among them toddlers. Joining me now is Squad Venegas. Squad, we know this year we've seen a record number of migrants making their way north. You were just reporting this last week on this air. And that river incredibly dangerous even when the weather is not a factor. But tonight we're learning about a 5-year-old as the latest victim.
Tom, a reminder of how deadly the river can be because of the rain, because of the time of the year. Now we have a 5-year-old that drowned crossing from Ciudad Juarez into El Paso, Texas. Mexican authorities recovered the body. Guatemalan authorities have informed that both the mother and the child were crossing into the U.S. Through that river, which, as we mentioned, is very dangerous right now. They were separated, and the 5-year-old young girl died. The mother is now receiving help from the government. Meanwhile, Tom, I should also mention that further down the river, also in Texas, in the Eagle Pass area, a 3-year-old boy died also crossing the river, while authorities recovered a 2-year-old that did survive. So a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old were with a group of migrants, a 2-month-old, that is. That 2-month-old was rescued by firemen after a border patrol called the firemen, and he was taken to a hospital in San Antonio, but the 3-year-old boy did die. This is how dangerous the river is. We were just on the phone with the sheriff in Eagle Pass, who told us migrants don't realize that because of the rain and the time of the year, it is extremely dangerous and very difficult to cross in areas where other migrants have crossed in the past. And we're seeing it with these minors that are dying, among other migrants that have been victims in this part of the country, Tom.
Yeah, these are horrific headlines, and I understand you spoke with the sheriff there, but are officials on either side of the border doing anything to prevent another tragedy like this from happening?
Well, you know, the young girl, the 5-year-old, that body was recovered by Mexican authorities. That's in El Paso, in Juarez, that is. And meanwhile, Border Patrol on the American side rescued that 2-month-old baby and the 3-year-old. So, you know, between trying to rescue migrants that get stuck in the river, patrolling the area, you've got federal, state, and local authorities. And the sheriff has told me in the past they don't have enough people to patrol this area in the river. So what he wanted me to say is to make sure that people know it is very dangerous. You're talking about a border in Texas that is just too long, and it's impossible to patrol for all the authorities. So the best thing they can do now is warn people of how dangerous that river is because of the currents at the moment and those rains we've seen in that area, Tom.
All the dangers of crossing a border plus the extreme weather. Okay, Squad Venegas for us. For more on the dangerous weather conditions sweeping the country, NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns joins Top Story live tonight. So, Bill, my first question to you is, why did things get so bad in Dallas?
Well, they had this historic drought, remember? So the ground is compact, the ground is hard, the rain fell so hard, the runoff was extreme, and that was a big part of it. So here's the Dallas area, and the highest totals were just to the east of Dallas. That's where we had the fatality with the lady in the car. That area picked up in Mesquite almost 15 inches of rain. So drought to deluge, second longest dry streak, followed by the second wettest August day in history. And this was a 1 in 1,000 year flood, 12 inches of rain in 12 hours. And there is a climate change connection to this. Warmer atmosphere can hold more water. And in the future, we can expect more events similar to this.
So, Bill, we're still tracking all this extreme weather. What can those states in the Gulf Coast expect?
Well, we got lucky today. Louisiana was under a flash flood watch, and they had a potential for significant flash flooding. It really didn't develop, and no one's complaining. We do have one area with a flash flood warning, but Shreveport got away with this so far today. We're still under about 3 million people in this flash flood watch. We still have the storm that is spinning over Monroe, Louisiana. All the heavy rain has shifted into Mississippi. Thunderstorms are pushing into areas of Atlanta, and also into areas of Alabama. So we'll continue to see areas of rain. And if we're going to get flash flooding out of this, the areas that are highlighted by our computers, the best chance up to 6 inches of rain widespread from Jackson up to Starkville in Mississippi. And then from Birmingham, we have to watch this too. And even the possibility of some heavy rain in Atlanta, which of course you get that heavy rain in Atlanta tomorrow, could mean more airport delays too.
All right, Bill Cairns for us tonight. Bill, we do appreciate it. Next tonight to another major story we're following, that deadly police shooting caught on camera in Atlanta in 2020. A special prosecutor on the investigation announcing that the officers involved will not face charges following the killing of Rayshard Brooks, the fatal shooting igniting days of violent protests. NBC's Miguel Almaguer has more.
The two officers who wrestled with Rayshard Brooks, including the one who fired the fatal shots as he ran away, will not face criminal charges after the 2020 death that sparked nationwide protests.
Officers had no way of knowing or anticipating that within seconds of this encounter, both would be attacked by Brooks.
Today, Atlanta's special prosecutor announcing officers Garrett Rolfe, who fired his gun, and Devin Brosnan committed no crimes, and that the use of deadly force was reasonable after Brooks stripped one of the officers of his taser, then fired that weapon at police as he ran.
Both acted as reasonable officers would under the facts and were justified in the use of force regarding the situation.
What's up, man? Hey, you're parked in the drive-thru right now.
After discovering Brooks asleep behind the wheel in a Wendy's parking lot, authorities say the 27-year-old, who was drunk and high, suddenly began fighting with officers and posed a threat as he ran. Following days of demonstration and after the Wendy's was destroyed, the former DA announced several charges against the officers, including a count of murder against Brosnan, before the special prosecutor took over.
You can't catch a drunk guy on drugs running down Metropolitan Avenue. You have to shoot him in the back. A jury should decide this case. That's the bottom line.
Tonight, both officers remain on administrative duty, cleared of wrongdoing in the eyes of the law.
All right, Miguel joins us now live. Miguel, you mentioned there in your piece about that Wendy's that was destroyed in the days following the death of Rayshard Brooks. And we also know that during other protests that summer, like the ones in 2020, the response to the death of George Floyd, the CNN Center in Atlanta was damaged as well. How are police tonight preparing for possible demonstrations?
Well, Tom, Atlanta police say they'll be ready for large crowds to protest, and they hope they'll do so peacefully. Right now, we know at that Wendy's, which has been rebuilt, that there has been a small number of crowds that have showed up. Right now, it remains relatively calm, but of course, this is the very early stages of a potentially long night. Atlanta police say they'll be ready for crowds, but again, they are urging everyone to stay peaceful. Tom.
All right, we hope so. Miguel Almaguer for us. Okay, tonight is a big night of politics. We want to turn to the midterms and decisive primary battles in New York and Florida, setting the stage for the midterms. In New York, two Democrats with more than 30 years in Washington are going head-to-head, and that race is getting very ugly. And in Florida, the winner of tonight's Democratic primary will face incumbent Governor Ron DeSantis, who may have his eye on a run for the White House. NBC's Shaq Brewster has more.
Tonight in New York, a major test of midterm messaging for both parties. In New York's 19th district, a special election for a House seat, seen as the final bellwether race before November.
I think it changed the dynamics of the country. I think it's shifting the political ground under our feet right now, and we are feeling that on the ground here.
Democrat Pat Ryan emphasizing protecting abortion rights, Republican Mark Molinaro stressing the economy and inflation. In New York's 12th district, the new congressional map sparking a rare but contentious clash between two powerful incumbent Democrats.
I'd say that I'm a more principled progressive.
Tonight will mark the end of 30-year careers for either Jerry Nadler, the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, or Carol Maloney, the powerful House Oversight Chair.
He is now running for governor.
And a battle for governor in Florida.
Hey, there's my governor, Nikki Freed.
Agriculture Commissioner Nikki Freed taking on Congressman Charlie Crist, a former Republican, for the Democratic nomination for governor.
The Democrats all over the state of Florida are looking for somebody new, something new, and they're looking for somebody who is ready to take on Ron DeSantis.
The winner will take on incumbent Florida governor and potential 2024 presidential candidate Ron DeSantis.
Experience and electability. We've got to beat Ron DeSantis. And I can beat him. I mean, I've been the governor. I've been the attorney general.
Democratic primary voters here share that focus.
I voted for Charlie Crist.
Why?
Because I think he stands a greater chance of beating our current governor.
That's your priority?
Yes.
Also tonight, Florida Democrats are set to nominate Representative Val Demings to take on Senator Marco Rubio. This will be a race that is closely watched. You can expect a lot of money to be spent in this battle, and it's one that could determine control of the U.S. Senate come next year. Tom?
All right, Shaq Brewster for us tonight. Shaq, we do thank you for all of that. Voters in two of the most populous states heading to the polls in what could be a major test ahead of November's midterms. I want to bring in a friend of Top Story, NBC News political director and moderator of Meet the Press, Chuck Todd. Chuck, let's talk about the great state of Florida. A lot of attention on the Democrats running for governor there. We just heard in Shaq's piece. I can remember when Charlie Crist was the Republican governor of Florida, now running as a Democrat against the Commissioner of Agriculture there, Nikki Fried. You're speaking with both of them tonight to know, do either of them have a real shot at beating DeSantis in November?
Look, it's Florida. And, you know, here's my favorite stat of the day that I've been dining out on. The last time a Florida governor's race was decided by more than 1 percentage point, you have to go back to 2006 when a guy named Charlie Crist was winning the governorship. Every one since, 10, 14, 18, all three decided by a percentage point or less. Look at the Senate races. So, you know, what's more likely, that this is a close race or that this is some blowout? So I do think it's a nomination worth having, and it's still Florida, and you can't assume that anything is a runaway for Republicans. That said, DeSantis looks strong, and you know, I can make a strong argument for why Charlie Crist is the better person to put up against DeSantis, and I can make a strong argument why Nikki Fried would be the better candidate in this moment in time. You know, it really depends on what you think the October race is going to be about at the end of it. I think the more it's about abortion rights, I buy the idea that Nikki Fried presents a better contrast. If it's about governing the state and sort of tired of the divisiveness, well, I think that feeds into the strengths of a Charlie Crist.
Chuck, it's interesting. There's one thing you didn't mention, and that is Florida has always been known as being a critical battleground state, but so many Democrats, even some political analysts, say it's really a red state. It's turning into a red state. And on that point, I do want to ask you about the Senate race that Shaq mentioned as well. Val Demings is the likely nominee for the Democrats up against incumbent Marco Rubio. The polling has sort of been all over the place. There's that one poll, I don't know if it's an outlier, I mean, it might be, that had Val Demings on top. Is Rubio really in trouble in his home state?
Look, I think it's more, look, I actually, if you're going to ask me which race is going to be closer, I think the Senate race is going to be closer than the gubernatorial race. Now, is that 4 points to 2 points? Is that 5 to 3? You know, we can debate that. But if you're going to ask me which race, because Val Demings has more, will probably have more money than Rubio at the end of the day. And she's been using it already. I just think they both come with pretty deep political benches. I happen to think this Senate race, Tom, is actually what is going to tell us how much of a battleground state Florida still is. If this Senate race is 2 points or less, then it's a reminder it's a red state as far as political power is concerned. But if you just look at it with the voting public, it's a swing state. You know, the Florida Democratic Party is probably, you know, to not get a little too geeky here, but if you compared the Florida Democratic Party statistically to baseball, you would say they have a really bad WAR, win above replacement, in that the Florida Democratic Party really punches below its weight. Right? It's a state that wants to be competitive. They've done a poor job at nominating candidates for various statewide offices to be competitive, except in Senate and Gov races. They haven't challenged these AG races enough, or CFO, or you know, the one that they've won in the last decade is Ag Commissioner, and that was due to a Republican that was literally in the middle of a scandal. So yeah, no, it is a poor state party that masks the competitiveness of Florida.
No, it's a great point when you think about name recognition and breakout political stars in Florida. In the Democratic Party, it has been a rough road for them, no doubt. I do, you know, we're in New York here, and I'm sort of fascinated by this race, right? It is just, it's so bizarre. You have Jerry Nadler going up against Carolyn Maloney, who were colleagues for decades, right, in the House. And this race is actually getting pretty ugly. I don't know if it's raised to the bar of the D.C. media, but here in the New York press, it's definitely, people have been covering this. What happens here?
Look, I think Nadler wins. I think the West Side is a better political base in a sleepy primary than the East Side to get into very parochial Manhattan politics, if you will. I mean, the joke is, They both, West Siders and East Siders, both are in the Hamptons in August. West Siders have to come back 2 days a week to work. The East Siders don't, right? So I think at the end of the day, Nadler probably has more voters that are going to show up than Maloney does. But let me ask you another question. Why are either one of them running in this late in their career?
Right.
Usually
Right.
when a member of Congress gets redistricted like this and put up against another member, they usually think, hey, all right, maybe I've got my pension. I've been here. Jerry Nadler's been a professional politician his whole life. I'm surprised they're both running, to be honest, because one of them is going to be a member of Congress still, but probably in the minority, not a committee chair. Anyway, I'm surprised they're both running, to be frank.
Chuck, a lot to talk about tonight. Thanks so much for joining Top Story. We know that you have a huge special tonight. It's the Meet the Press Election Night special with Chuck and Kristen Welker. If you've been watching these throughout the past few months, they've been incredible. This one starts tonight at 9 p.m. We will be watching. All right, in addition to that primary coverage, Kristen has also been following new details on the search of former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. Tonight, we're learning more about the massive number of documents recovered by the FBI and how sensitive some of the material really was.
Tonight, stunning new revelations about those documents recovered from Mar-a-Lago. According to the New York Times, citing people briefed on the matter, more than 300 documents had classified markings. Some were handed over by former President Trump earlier this year. Others seized in that controversial FBI search of his home. All as the National Archives posted the letter it sent to Trump lawyers back in January after Mr. Trump had sent them 15 boxes of documents. The letter said the boxes included 100 classified documents, 700 pages in all, including up to the level of top secret. Warning there was a criminal investigation and DOJ assessment of potential damage resulting from the apparent manner in which these materials were stored. According to the letter, President Biden authorized the National Archives to reject any executive privilege claims by Mr. Trump, allowing the FBI to examine the material. Then in June, Mr. Trump turned over additional classified documents to DOJ officials. And according to the Times, 11 sets of classified documents were retrieved during the FBI search at Mar-a-Lago on August 8th. That unprecedented search of a former president's home sparking significant blowback from Republicans and Mr. Trump, who just filed a lawsuit to block review of the documents until a watchdog known as a special master is appointed. Mr. Trump blasting the DOJ investigation as politically motivated, his lawyers writing in their suit, to date, the government has failed to legitimize its historic decision to raid the home of a president who had been fully cooperative. Meanwhile, we're learning this morning former National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien testified before the January 6th committee. That's according to two sources familiar with the matter. The committee is expected to hold more hearings next month. Tom?
All right, Kristen Welker for us. Kristen, thank you. And again, we will be watching tonight. Turning now to the violent crime wave in New York and other cities across the country. Shocking videos of brutal attacks raising questions about bail reform, with critics claiming that criminals are being set free only to break the law again. Stephen Romo has some of the new incidents.
Tonight, terrifying sucker punch attacks putting a spotlight on crime in New York and in cities across the country.
What would make someone want to do that?
I mean, it's just very disgusting and just disappointing to see that happening all over the city.
This assault from over the weekend in a Brooklyn shopping center.
That guy was caught unaware. He didn't know that was coming. And I've seen people done that over and over, time and again. And it's unconscionable what they're doing.
The victim is expected to recover as the search continues for the attacker. It's eerily similar to another sucker punch attack just days earlier outside a Bronx restaurant. Prosecutors now accusing Bui Van Phu of randomly attacking Jesus Cortez outside that restaurant on August 12th. Surveillance video released by the NYPD shows Cortez being struck in the head in an attack he did not appear to see coming. He was in perfect condition. He was about to come home. Phu was arrested and originally charged with attempted murder for that punch, but charges were lowered to assault and harassment, allowing Phu to be released on bail. The district attorney telling NBC New York the charges were downgraded because the office, quote, pursued charges based on the investigation. This set off a firestorm on the issue of bail reform.
Do you have any comment or update about the convicted sex offender in the Bronx who attacked a man and then he was let go without any bail?
Yes, that was a horrific situation on all fronts.
In an unexpected move, Governor Kathy Hochul stepped in and ordered Fu to be arrested days later, saying she took the matter into her own hands because Fu was a repeat offender, already on lifetime parole, convicted of raping a 17-year-old back in 1995. Efforts to reach Fu or his lawyer were unsuccessful. The victim's brother speaking about his condition. He's stable, thank God. He's day to day. We simply ask God to help him, or the justice system to be hard-handed against these people. Murder is down 10.5% in New York City this year, but the 7 major crimes tracked by the NYPD are up 36% since last year. And critics have pointed to bail reform as a major factor in that jump. My brother is in this condition because of these criminals walking the street. Earlier this month, the NYPD saying nearly 25% of those arrested for burglary go on to commit another felony within 60 days. But data from the New York City Criminal Justice Agency shows that since bail reform started in 2020, that numbers haven't changed much. The vast majority, more than 95% of people arrested, have not been arrested again, and less than 1% commit violent crimes. And advocates argue that crime has gone up in cities that have not instituted reforms, just like those that have. But New Yorkers say something needs to change.
It kind of makes you think that you got to always be watching your back no matter where you go.
In Seattle, a similar story with murder playing out in broad daylight and on surveillance video. You can see 48-year-old Aaron Folk swinging a metal bar at a 66-year-old man. That victim dying from his injuries over the weekend. He's now charged with first-degree murder and is being held on a $2.5 million bail. He pleaded not guilty. But just 8 days before the attack, Folk was charged with felony harassment in another county for allegedly threatening to kill a public transit safety officer, where he also pleaded not guilty. Prosecutors wanted to hold Folk on a $10,000 bond, but he was released with a referral for services, according to a spokesperson for the prosecuting attorney's office. Violent crime in Seattle is up this year, rising above records from the past 14 years, according to Seattle PD. Some say these are the kinds of red flags that should not be left unchecked.
When we're talking about violent, repeat felons, and there are times where people are out on 8 felony aggravated robbery bonds and they get another one, and that's ridiculous, and it shouldn't be happening.
All right, Stephen Romo joins us now live in studio. So, Stephen, of course, there is a racial component to this debate. What are both sides saying?
Well, critics of bail reform say that black and brown people are far too often the victims of these crimes that are perpetrated by repeat offenders, saying the concern should be on them and not on the accused. But advocates of changing bail systems say there are disparities in bond amounts compared to income and charges for people of color, and something needs to be done to make the system more just. They do point to cities like Houston, Texas, saying there's been success for bail reform for misdemeanor offenses in that city. But, Tom, I got to tell you, there's still so much debate on this issue in Houston, even with that success.
It just feels like it's everything everyone is talking about in New York City. All right, Stephen Romo for us. Stephen, thank you. Still ahead tonight, the emergency landing. Did you see this new video? It shows part of an Alaska's airline engine breaking apart shortly after takeoff. What the airline is saying about this scary situation, plus the mysterious illness that has now killed more than 30 dogs in Michigan. The symptoms to look out for in the investigation just launched. And celebrity drought, the new warning for several Hollywood A-listers accused of using an excessive amount of water despite California's worsening drought. What happened to them? Stay with us. All right, we're back now with the warnings handed down to some of the biggest names in Hollywood. Massive stars, including Kim Kardashian and Kevin Hart, called out for wasting water amid a record drought in Southern California. Some A-listers using more than 14 times their monthly water allotment to fill their pools or water their lawns. NBC's Gotti Schwartz has more.
With California in the midst of a historic drought emergency, tonight some of the biggest names in Hollywood are finding themselves in hot water. The Kardashians, Dwayne Wade, Sylvester Stallone, and Kevin Hart, among the 2,000-plus customers warned for excessive water usage, according to notices of exceedance obtained by the LA Times. NBC has not seen the documents, but a spokesperson for the Las Virgenes Water District confirming their contents.
Our reservoirs are severely depleted. The land is incredibly dry. There is not a lot of water to go around.
In June, the district, which serves a large portion of Los Angeles County, implementing strict usage guidelines, including limiting residents to just 8 minutes a week of outdoor watering.
All right, so now we're in my backyard.
But some celebrities failing to play their part. Properties belonging to Kim and Kourtney Kardashian using a combined excess of 333,000 gallons of water, enough to fill up half of an Olympic-sized swimming pool. A Calabasas home belonging to actor Kevin Hart exceeding its monthly budget 519% in June. Sylvester Stallone's $18 million home guzzling up more than 533% more than its allotment, and former NBA star Dwayne Wade and actress Gabrielle Union using up a whopping 1,400% of the water budget at their Hidden Hills homes. The couple telling the LA Times in a statement that a pool issue that has since been fixed was to blame, adding they will continue to go to extensive lengths to rectify the issue. A representative for Stallone telling NBC News the Rocky star has more than 500 mature trees on the property that need to be watered, adding he's addressing the situation responsibly and proactively. Representatives for Hart and the Kardashians did not respond to NBC's request for comment.
It doesn't matter if it's a celebrity. It doesn't matter if it's somebody who doesn't have the same means. Everybody's treated completely equal. We're serious about this. This is critical, and we need everybody to be part of that solution.
All right, Gadi Schwartz joins us now live from Los Angeles. Gadi, this is so strange because celebrities claim to be environmentalists, and these are big-name celebrities taking steps to curb their usage. I guess they're not. But for those who don't cut back, what can the city do? Money is clearly not an object for some of these people with these massive homes.
Yeah, Tom, you hit it right on the head. How do you get somebody to comply when they have millions and millions of dollars and even huge fines are just a nuisance? Well, you got to think good old-fashioned grounding like when we were kids. First come a couple of warnings, then fines, then water districts will slap a regulator on your water main. I think we've got a picture of one. These will slow down the flow to your house to basically a trickle. So high water pressure for those fancy mansions, forget about it. They keep them on for 2 weeks or until the owner promises to comply. If they don't, Tom, then you're water grounded for a month. So as far as we know, about 20 homes with the most egregious violations have those installed, but no celebrities that we know of have yet made that list. So we'll keep you posted.
Gadi, real quick while I have you, there are a few celebrities bigger than Gadi Schwartz. Has the Schwartz family been cited yet?
You're looking, this is my magic grapefruit tree. I mean, you heard some people have yeah, it's very green, and I am very obsessed with getting this tree all the water that it needs as long as we comply. So that means stealing from the other plants in my yard, and if I have to take bath water and water this tree, I don't want to lose my grapefruits. They're so delicious, you know.
Gadi Schwartz had a green thumb. Who knew? All right, Gadi, we appreciate that. Okay, we want to turn now to some other serious news. An explosive whistleblower complaint filed by a former Twitter executive. He's claiming the social media giant deceived federal regulators about security plans and put the private information of its users at risk. Gabe Gutierrez has this story.
First, a respected hacker known as Mudge, Peter Zatko, then became Twitter's head of security until earlier this year. He's now filed an explosive 84-page whistleblower complaint alleging the social media giant deceived federal regulators about egregious deficiencies in its security.
He decided the risk was worth it. He cared enough about the platform and its users that he was going to come forward.
The complaint accuses Twitter of violating a 2011 settlement with the Federal Trade Commission by falsely claiming it had a solid security plan. It also alleges too many employees had access to sensitive user data, violations of SEC rules, and fraudulent misrepresentations in communications with the board of directors. Zatko speaking with CNN.
Large tech companies need to know what the risks are, and then they also need to have an appetite to go fix it.
Twitter hired Zatko after a high-profile hack in 2020 that compromised prominent accounts. The company now says Zatko was fired from his senior executive role for ineffective leadership and poor performance. What we've seen so far is a false narrative that is riddled with inconsistencies and inaccuracies.
Twitter has become kind of the de facto town square.
Still, the complaint comes amid Twitter's legal battle with Elon Musk, who's trying to get out of a $44 billion contract to buy the platform, arguing that Twitter has drastically underestimated the number of so-called bots or fake accounts. Zatko's whistleblower complaint alleges Twitter's CEO tweeted false and misleading statements about the company's handling of bots.
This speaks to the misinformation and disinformation. A lot of these bots and spam, they're used for commercial purposes to sell products, but they're also used as propaganda to sway public opinions.
All right, Gabe joins us now on set. So, Gabe, the 84-page whistleblower complaint was actually sent to Capitol Hill. What's the reaction, Ben?
Well, there has been a lot of reaction today, Tom, and this is one of those rare instances where Republicans and Democrats have agreed on something. Leaders from both parties say that several congressional committees will now investigate the whistleblower's allegations.
Okay, Gabe Gutierrez first. Gabe, we appreciate it. When we come back, Paul Pelosi sentenced to jail time. The husband of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi pleading guilty to DUI charges, how long he's supposed to spend behind bars. Stay with us. With Paul Pelosi, husband of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, sentenced to 5 days in jail. The 82-year-old pleaded guilty to DUI charges for a crash in Napa County in May. Pelosi was also sentenced to 3 years of probation. He'll be required to attend a 3-month DUI program and pay $7,000 in fines. Now to the terrifying moment caught on camera during an Alaska Airlines flight. New video shows metal paneling on one of the plane's engine tearing apart and eventually flying off. Imagine seeing that at takeoff. It happened after the San Diego-bound flight was forced to return to Seattle's airport due to an unusual vibration on the left side of the aircraft. Luckily, no one was injured. And authorities are investigating a mysterious illness that has killed more than 30 dogs in Michigan. Authorities say the animals are exhibiting symptoms similar to parvovirus, including throwing up and bloody stool. The virus is highly contagious and usually affects puppies. Officials are urging residents to get their dogs vaccinated. All right, now heading out west, where California Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed a bill that would have allowed safe drug injection sites to open in 3 cities across the state. It's a controversial experiment which would allow people to use illegal drugs in a supervised manner. It sounds like something that would be right up progressive California's alley. So was the decision based on evidence or Newsom's political aspirations? Jake Ward has that story.
Tonight, California Governor Gavin Newsom has vetoed a bill that would have supported legal drug injection sites in California. It's a cutting-edge idea in a nation plagued by deaths from heroin, fentanyl, and other opioids. Allow people to inject them safely under supervision.
I think there's people who worry that it will attract more conspicuous drug use. But of course, the point of the centers and what advocates say is that the whole point is to have people use drugs indoors in a safe environment so that there is less public drug use and less paraphernalia like used needles on the street.
The new legislation would have created a 5-year trial of these sites in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Oakland. But in a signed veto letter, Newsom said, quote, worsening drug consumption challenges in these areas is not a risk we can take. Newsom says he has long supported the cutting edge of harm reduction strategies, telling reporters at the San Francisco Chronicle back in 2018 that he was, quote, very, very open to the idea. But opponents like the Orange County Sheriff's Office called the safe injection site proposal a disregard for life that would accelerate the state's drug epidemic.
They may be new in the U.S. in terms of sanctioned facilities, but they are not new, globally. There's additional data, showing that they have prevented overdose deaths around the world.
The Centers for Disease Control estimates that in the U.S., drug overdose deaths have been increasing by double-digit percentages each of the last few years, reaching over 100,000 in a year. A sign that traditional tactics may not be slowing the crisis down.
You find way less
on-site safely, securely, without having to worry about overdosing.
Until now, the U.S. has only had privately operated facilities in Rhode Island and New York, where NBC's Jacob Soboroff took us in December of last year.
Normally, I'd be down the block, sitting on the stoop, injecting myself in the arm, not Jerry who's walking by or driving by.
According to the organization running the site, On Point NYC, the centers in New York have been used more than 30,000 times since opening late last year and have reversed more than 400 overdoses, presumably saving hundreds of lives. But there are still local concerns as well as federal ones.
At the federal level, I think, the DOJ has indicated that it's open to some level of permissiveness when it comes to these sites, and that would really allow for a lot more of them to open both in New York and across the country. At the national level, there's a certain level of politics taking place where people are making these political calculations, I'm sure, that have to do with elections.
After his veto, Newsom now will not have to explain the sensitive topic on the national stage should he attempt a run for president. Although denying interest, he ran this ad just last month attacking Florida politics.
Freedom? It's under attack in your state.
His veto is a sign that while experts say we need to rethink our approach to drug abuse in this country, even one of its most progressive governors is not ready to commit. Jake Ward, NBC News, San Francisco.
Okay, we thank Jake for that one. Next tonight, students are heading back to school, but a major teacher shortage is leaving some districts scrambling. Now, one solution is catching on in some rural areas, a 4-day school week. Priscilla Thompson has more.
I'm intending on it.
It's back to school for students in DeKalb, Texas.
Smile, baby.
But this year, they'll be spending only 4 days a week here instead of 5. The goal, to attract and retain teachers.
So you all are starting the year with no vacancies.
We actually filled all our positions before June, which is rare for us.
And challenging. Nationwide, there are 280,000 fewer public school teachers this year than before the pandemic. To attract educators, small rural districts across the country are shifting to a 4-day school week to compete with larger school systems that can often afford to pay teachers more.
So this is a chart.
Veteran teacher Laura Hunt was considering a new career until she heard about the shorter week.
I remember being a teacher and spending my Sundays lesson planning and grading papers, and it's more than just the school week. What will this change mean for your life?
I feel like it's buying me some of that family time back that used to be consumed with school tasks.
While students who attend school 4 days a week are still learning, research shows they don't grow as much as those in school 5 days a week. A recent study found students with 4-day weeks spent an average of 58 fewer hours in school every year. Hours that experts say add up and can be detrimental over time.
Is that a concern, especially given the learning loss from the pandemic?
That's a big concern, but there's going to be a greater opportunity for families to do extracurricular things like going to museums or doing crafts.
Here in DeKalb, the district is making up for the lost time by adding an hour to every school day. It's also giving up 13 days previously built in for possible COVID shutdowns and bad weather. On Fridays, a church is offering low-cost childcare.
What do you think of that?
I think it's exciting for them because we get more time together as a family.
Are you worried at all that she'll be learning less since she's only in school 4 days instead of 5?
A little bit.
I think it's kind of the way that you take it. I don't know. You learn a lot at home, too.
How will you know if this is working?
Student achievement is important to us, but if we see a decrease in discipline, we see a decrease in attendance issues, I think that will be a huge indicator for us as well.
Raise your hand.
Putting a new school model to the test and hoping for high marks. Priscilla Thompson, NBC News, DeKalb, Texas.
Now to top stories Global Watch and the 15th journalist killed in Mexico this year. Officials say Fredir Roman was shot and killed in Chilpancingo, the capital of the southern state of Guerrero. He ran a local news program online covering state politics. Prosecutors have not revealed who they think was behind the killing. And an American soldier in custody tonight after a car crash in Italy that left a 15-year-old boy dead. Italian media reporting a toxicology exam showed the 20-year-old servicewoman was driving at 4 times the legal alcohol limit at the time of the crash. She's now under house arrest at Aviano Air Base in northeastern Italy. That boy's mother now fighting to have the servicewoman tried in Italy instead of being sent back to the U.S. Staying in Italy now, a massive super yacht sinking off the coast there. New video showing the 130-foot vessel going down Sunday morning. The yacht, valued at nearly $50 million, was traveling from the boot of Italy to Sicily. Everyone on board did manage to evacuate safely. It is still unclear what caused that yacht to sink.
All right, coming up on Top Story, the race against time with the monkeypox virus now in all 50 states. Officials struggle to stay ahead of the demand for vaccines as the public gets frustrated. Okay, we are back now with that monkeypox outbreak. The White House is releasing an additional 1.8 million doses of vaccine as health officials are not able to keep up with demand. Here in New York City, where the virus is most present, first dose recipients are growing very, very frustrated with the rollout. Sinclair Esamoah has more.
Tonight, all 50 states reporting at least one case of monkeypox, and New York State reporting its first child diagnosed with the virus.
It's spread via close, intimate contact, and that includes sharing bedding, sharing utensils, sharing a toothbrush, for example. These close, intimate exposures that you may have at home, it's not a surprise that it's spreading outside of that men who have sex with men community.
New York City accounts for almost 20% of America's largest ever monkeypox outbreak, reporting more than 2,500 cases. New Yorkers, done with the first dose of the vaccine, growing restless.
I would get a second shot anywhere that it was available.
Like Connor DeVoe and Matthew Hampton, New York City residents say they know others who have received the second dose outside the city.
I do feel like it's odd that the state of New York has not prioritized a more densely populated area like Manhattan.
So far, the New York City Health Department says it has administered 63,000 vaccines. 92% of them received by members of the LGBTQ+ community as of August 18th. At the federal level, the White House announcing they'll release additional vaccines.
An additional 1.8 million doses of vaccine will be available to jurisdictions for ordering.
The new batch sent to locations that administer the vaccine intradermally and have used 90% of their current supply, like New York.
Because we don't have enough vaccine, we're pivoting to what's called intradermal, which literally translates to within the skin. And that's a pivot from subcutaneous, which means below the skin. And the reason we can give a lower dose intradermally or within the skin is because your skin is actually loaded up with immune cells.
The Biden administration declared monkeypox a public health emergency on August 4th after criticism it was not moving fast enough to address the crisis.
Nobody wants to see this turn into what COVID turned into.
And Tom, I'm standing in front of one of the 13 locations used in New York City to distribute monkeypox vaccines. But it's a rollout that's still struggling to be equitable. For example, if we look at Black New Yorkers, only 12% of them eligible for the vaccines have gotten them, even though they make up 31% of monkeypox vaccine eligible recipients. So this is an inequity that many health officials are trying to remedy, and something we're going to be watching closely as this prevention effort continues. Tom?
A lot of work is right. Okay, Sinclair, we thank you for that. Coming up, imagine longing for a family, even a single relative, and thinking you were alone. Then finding out your own brother was right in front of you and you had no idea. This is an incredible story that we'll tell you about when we come back. Finally tonight, a sibling surprise, a DNA test revealing not only a new family member, but a brother who was just down the hall.
As far back as she can remember, Dallas resident Christina Sadberry always wanted to know the truth about finding her biological family members.
I just did a 23andMe just to see if there was any birth family that might have popped up through DNA since I was adopted.
That test came up empty until musician Raymond Turner also took a DNA test.
And I was just looking to find out what part of Africa I was from.
Raymond's test connecting the dots and revealing something unexpected.
When I opened up the app, the very first thing I saw was a name and a DNA percentage, and then they give you the relationship, and it said half-sister.
That's when the siblings got to work, going online and making contact.
We did what most people would do, and that's we took to Facebook.
For Christina, that face staring back at her on the screen seemed oddly familiar.
Like, he looks so familiar. Maybe we've seen him before, but I think looking back, I see a little bit of me and him.
It turns out Christina had seen him before, earlier that day when she took her 11-year-old son to the hospital.
And they had actually walked here by the studio, and she saw me sitting here.
Raymond makes music with patients at Cook Children's Hospital.
I started working here in December of 2015.
That biological family Christina started searching for all those years ago was right across the hall.
How are you?
In that moment, you know, there had been no lapse of time. It was like I was hugging the sister, like this person that I had known all my life.
I never would have expected it.
Brother and sister sharing a moment they never expected. Now, with many more moments to look forward to.
Thank you so much. I'm a hugger.
I am too.
Love those stories. We want to thank our Dallas station, NBC5, for their help on that story. And we thank you for watching Top Story tonight. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. Stay right there. More news on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.